Well, we left off last week with the birth of a little boy. And so Hannah's prayer was undoubtedly, was prayed for many years, was finally answered. God heard her prayer and remembered her, and she made a vow that if God would give her a son, then she would give him to the Lord. 1 Samuel chapter 1, we're just going to look at a few verses tonight, beginning at verse 21 and continuing through the end of the chapter to 28. We'll stop there tonight. I know this is only the third message of looking at this great book, but I have found it very sweet, very tender, very much needed, very just good. It's refreshing to see a good example in the Bible of someone that's faithful. And what is our life supposed to look like? Well, Hannah and Elkanah's house are definitely a good example for us, and you're going to see that just continue tonight. The first thing I want you to see tonight is keeping the child. Keeping the child. She has made a vow that if the Lord would give her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord. Now let's look what happens in verse 21. You'll see the setting. And the setting once again, and this is the second time at least that we've come to this occasion of annual sacrifice going to Shiloh. Shiloh is where the tabernacle, the Lord's house is. This is way before Jerusalem is established, when David established it as the place where a temple would be built under Solomon's reign. But it's Shiloh. And now once again we come to this annual visit to Shiloh, this opportunity to come and sacrifice. And it says, now the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. It's interesting there that it was Hannah that makes the vow, but under the law, under the Mosaic law, it is the husband's duty to confirm that vow. And he will make that decision. When is it going to be, and when will we do this vow? And so really that's why it's worded that way. The decision is in his hands. He has the power of that. Notice in verse 22, Hannah did not go. And her husband, Elkanah, have a conversation about this. They begin talking about when is the best time to do this. And Hannah says, not until the child is weaned, then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. And there's some things here in verse 22 that I want you to see. It's pretty interesting. First of all, what weaned means. You know, we think it's when we get off of the bottle. And it would be a little bit more than that in their time. A weaned child would be one that was a little more independent and able to take care of itself. So when we talk about weaned, don't think about the 6 week litter of kittens that you're going to sell to your neighbor. This is not even a year either. And it looks like at least the 1 year mark is come along, and Hannah says, no, he's not ready. Probably not going to take a 12-month-old baby and take it to the tabernacle and hand it over to the Eli so he can take care of a baby. She's going to raise this child up a little bit longer. And so weaned probably means about 2 or 3 years old. I tend to lean towards more the 3-year mark. And she says, then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord. So you have this waiting until the child has been weaned. And I want you to see this. Hannah is just a a great example of motherhood here. Hannah loves this baby. Because she said, I will dedicate the child to the Lord, and a lot of you know the story of what happens to Samuel. For just, it may flash across your mind, does Hannah really love Samuel? She loves Samuel with all her heart, and you can see the bond between the mother and the child here. And those of you who have, those women in here who have had children, you know that that bond is out of this world strong between the baby and the mother. And so you see this, this love that she has here, but also sitting side by side with the love of this mother, you have her love for the Lord. Look at what she says there in verse 22. Then I will take him. And she will take him because she has made this vow to God. And it says the purpose of taking him would be that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. She says, I am going to give him away to the Lord. I'm going to dedicate him to the Lord. Well, notice in 23, you see once again Elkanah showing himself to be just a wonderful husband. He shows support for her. He shows support of the whole situation and also shows confidence in Hannah. And I think that's very important for a good husband, is going to put a lot of confidence in his wife's spiritual growth, development, and decision making. And he trusts her. He has confidence in Hannah. And I think it's a beautiful picture of such a healthy relationship in the home. This, I don't know about you, but I think we could go way too fast over these verses and miss a lot of the important things that we need to have present in our life. Husbands and wives will have stronger marriages when they both are in fellowship with God. And you see that picture here of Hannah and Elkanah being in great fellowship with God, and it translates to being in great fellowship with one another. They have a healthy marriage because they have a healthy relationship with God. So you see the support there. And so look at Elkanah's response in verse 23. He says, do what seems best to you. Well, to me, that doesn't sound like a 11th century BC typical husband talking to his wife like she's some kind of animal that he drags behind her by the nape of her hair. He says, do what seems best to you. In other words, I have confidence in you, Hannah. We already know this, don't we? That Hannah is a woman of prayer. And we know that Elkanah is dedicated to worshiping the Lord at Shiloh. They are doing this the right way. And so he says, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Really puts the decision in her into the field. Only let the Lord establish his word. And that is a very important little phrase there in that verse. And what he is saying is this: the Lord is in control of these things. The Lord will establish his word. And you say, well, I'm a little bit confused because I thought it was Hannah that makes a vow. Shouldn't he have said something like, let your word be established? No. That's not the way Elkanah thinks, and that's not the way we should think. We should be thinking about, even though I have made this vow, even though it's something that I think I want to do, and I've promised to God, and I'm going to fulfill that. But what he is saying is this: the Lord's will trumps everything. It will be the Lord's word that will establish what is going to happen. In other words, keep an open mind, because God's going to be working through you and going to be working in this situation. So what's happening is Elkanah is saying, we are engaged with the Lord with making this vow, but now what we need to do is look to the Lord and how does He want us to fulfill this so that it pleases Him. I hope that's making sense to you. In other words, it is a high, and we need this nowadays more than ever, a high view of God. I might be mistaken. Maybe it's just me. But I sense, even among God's people sometimes, a lower view of God than is appropriate. In fact, I also see a lower view of Jesus than is appropriate. We should have a high view of God. We should have a high view of Jesus. And I'm going to tell you something else we need to have a high view of is our engagement with the Lord, just like Elkanah is saying. Elkanah is saying, you know what, the Lord's will is going to be what we really need to follow in this situation. When should we go? When is He going to be ready to be weaned? When should we follow through with this? It's going to be entirely up to the Lord. That's just called yielding to the Lord and being open to the Lord's will. Not enough people are doing that these days. Notice what happens next in verse 20, the end of verse 23. The narrator, the writer of the book, tells us what happens. Then the woman stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned him. So you see this really healthy physical family relationship, and you also see a very healthy spiritual family relationship happening here. The second thing I want you to see, so that's keeping the child. And the second thing I want you to see is giving the child. Notice what is happening here in verse 24 through 28. You see that the Samuel is going to be presented at the tabernacle at Shiloh. Now when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. I'm going to guess probably 3 years old or so. There's this, they go to Shiloh. We have the child. They've made the decision following the will of God. Is it time? The child, they're taking him now, and they bring these offerings, 3 bulls. These offerings are right in line. Another example in this little study of Elkanah and his family, they are doing it according to the Mosaic law. They are doing everything the right way. Y'all with me tonight? Y'all don't fall asleep now. It is important that we strive to know how to do things the right way. And I know it ain't cool to do things the right way. Not these days. In fact, it seems like among evangelical circles that sometimes you're more popular if you're a little bit crude, if you're a little bit off, you're a little bit rough, and it makes you more somehow, I don't even know the word, like more humble about your sin. Well, I'm a sinner, and so I'm just going to kind of let my sin show. Dear friend, there's nothing wrong with carrying your Bible to church. There's nothing wrong with going to church on Sunday morning and never missing a Sunday morning. Don't let the world and don't let people make you think that you should back off to be a stronger person of faith. In other words, I think it's a pushback against legalism a little bit. I don't want to be thought of as someone who's a rule follower. Dear friend, it's always right to do the right thing. Instead of trying to live rough and be cool and fit in with what we might sense as mainstream Christianity. Mainstream Christianity is not the standard. The Bible is the standard for how we conduct ourselves. So I'm personally not real impressed by the popular culture that we have in Christianity right now. It's really not cool. But Elkanah and the family here do it the right way. They do it according to what the Word of God said to do it. So in verse 25, you see they slaughtered the bull. They brought the child to Eli. Now we're back to Eli, and Hannah is going to talk to Eli here in these next few verses. Verse 26, and she said, "O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord." Eli, this happened about 3 years ago. You remember it was in last week's text. But in time, about 3 years has passed since those previous verses when Eli thought she was drunk. She was praying. Her mouth was moving, but it wasn't making any sound. And Eli accused her of being under the influence. And she said, "Oh no, I'm not under the influence, I'm praying." He probably does remember that. But she reminds him, "I am the one who prayed." And then in verse 27, "For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted my petition, which I have asked of him." This is really a beautiful picture here. And she is really just giving a testimony about the power of prayer, isn't she? She says, "I have prayed, the Lord has answered my prayer." That's a good thing if you want something to say to somebody tomorrow or this week when you go out into the world. Follow Hannah's example. And if you don't have anything else to say about the Lord, what you could say is, "I've been praying about this, and God's been answering my prayers." That's a wonderful testimony to tell someone about. But there's also another testimony here. It is about what's about prayer, and it's about the answering of the prayer. "The Lord has granted my petition, which I have asked of him." And so Eli might not have known. He might not have heard the good news when they did that gender reveal party. He may not have been invited. It might have been too far. Maybe he had a revival. He had to go preach. But she says, "By the way, Eli, that prayer that I was praying, God has answered that prayer." And so notice in verse 28, here comes the formal dedication. And there's some, I'm looking at a New King James Version, and I have lent him. I have, that's the past tense of lend, or a form of the word borrowed. The word is, in the Hebrew, is Saul, and it means dedicated. She says, "Therefore I also have Sauled him." If you're not following me, S-A-U-L. Saul. Does that ring a bell? Saul. The first king of Israel, Saul. She said, "I have Sauled him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be Sauled," or dedicated to the Lord. So they worship the Lord there. This is going to come into play here in about 6 or 7 chapters in 1 Samuel. You're going to meet a man named Saul. I think it's Saul, son of Kish. And his name means dedicated. And he is going to be anointed by a man named Samuel, a grown man named Samuel. This one who has been Sauled to the Lord, dedicated to the Lord, is going to anoint Saul. But Samuel is going to be a different kind of man than Saul, and we're going to see that contrast in the future when we get to the book. Samuel will be, let me just say this at this point, Samuel will end up being what Saul was supposed to be. He will actually be a good and faithful servant of the Lord. Saul will not be. And so there's some irony, there's some foreshadowing going on here. There's a little bit of play on words going on here with the language. He is dedicated to the Lord. I want to leave you with this. Hannah's faith, you see how her faith just continued throughout the entire process. When she was barren, she still comes to the Lord. She still worships. She doesn't lose sight of who is in control. She just comes back to God and is faithful to God. Sometimes when the Lord blesses us, human nature sometimes is to let off the gas a little bit. Kind of sit back and think, boy, I've got it good, and I'm just going to let off. Hannah never lets off the gas. Hannah is as faithful at the beginning of the process, all the way through the process. She didn't back away from her vow. She followed through with her vow. She weaned. She took care of the child. She loved the child. And then she dedicates the child. And so you see the strength of her faith is seen in her integrity to keep her vow to the Lord. That's another thing that is missing nowadays is integrity. You would think among God's people we would have integrity, but what we see way too often is deceitfulness. That's not integrity. We see two-facedness. We see hypocrisy. Hannah is as pure as it comes. She is someone with godly integrity. Second thing I want to leave you with is that her faith is a reflection of her home. Her home is, it's just, there's so much evidence in chapter 1 that Elkanah and her have a healthy home. Is spiritual, things they do are spiritually motivated instead of self-motivated. They do everything and revolve everything around God as the center of their home. Don't see that a lot nowadays. You also see a godly character in the husband and wife relationship. He loves her, and they both love the Lord, and she loves him, and he has exhibited this confidence in her spiritual decisions. Men, build up your wives. Talk about the Bible with your wives. Talk about things and center them around spiritual motivated decisions, not selfishly motivated, but put God at the center of your marriage, and I promise you'll have a happier and better marriage. You'll have a strong marriage when you put God in the center of your life. And finally, this family serves as a model for a healthy relationship to the Lord. And there's about 4 things, and I've mentioned them all. Faithfulness. They are faithful. They just keep coming and doing and coming and doing. Prayer. Prayer is what this whole thing was centered on. Asking for a child. Prayer. Godly integrity. Following through with their vow. Not deceitful. Not selfish motivations. And then finally, did you notice the last phrase? So they, and the subject is sort of broad. Who is they? They. It's more than one. I think it includes Elkanah. I think it includes Hannah. I think it includes Samuel. I think it includes the whole family. So they worship there. This was I'm not trying to leave you on a downer here, but it could have been a little bit of a sad day as well. Leaving the child, the 3-year-old child, leaving him behind in the custody of Eli, working in the tabernacle there, and going back home. And here you have this little family, a picture of the family here, worshiping God. Everything they did it for the Lord. Great questions, convicting message. Do we do any of those things? Hopefully those are things that we can work on and strive for. Our Father, we thank you for this